This is the Fight Fan with your host, Pete Hoffman, and we're being joined right now by Megan Olivi of the UFC and also NFL on Fox. You still doing that?
Oh, yeah. It's awesome. I had my third season last year. This will be my fourth. So very exciting times.
That is I love to see. Listen, I've watched UFC forever, but I like to see other people in other areas experience the cool, like what I see on a regular. Like to have you on NFL is awesome. So, what is your favorite part about the NFL?
It's just totally different. Like first of all, it's a very short day on Sundays. It's just really the game a couple hours beforehand where, we'll have 8 hours of fight sometimes. So it's very different. It's just different challenges. And for me, it's unique in terms of how can I be a storyteller in a role that has a lot to do with just reporting the facts of what's happening in front of you. So I always try to bring in that storytelling element that I feel like I do well with the UFC. So I try to bring that over to the NFL, and it's actually worked out for for all the broadcasts I've been on. So it's been really cool, and it's just fun. But once I did like a couple of games, you just realize all athletes are kind of the same. Like there'd be football players, and I'm like, oh, they remind me of this fighter, or fighters that remind me of certain football players. And so it was actually a much easier transition than I thought it was going to be. And so it's been really fun. It's just a new, different challenge, and it's really rewarding, and it sounds selfish, but it's rewarding when people see you being able to do two sports. So they can see me do a fight one weekend and then a football game the next. And to get that sort of feedback where people are surprised that I'm on a sidelines, it's fun. It's nice to be able to surprise people like that.
Because again, you're from the East Coast, but are you like a West Coast? Do you have a West Coast team that you like? Do you have an East Coast team that you like? Do you have any sport rooting interest at all?
I mean, the Giants for sure were my team growing up. My first NFL game I ever did as a reporter was the Giants versus the Houston Texans, sorry. And it was amazing because here I was like years before wearing an Eli Manning jersey, and then I'm interviewing Eli Manning on the field, and it was just kind of like a full circle moment for me. I was a Giants fan my whole life. I mean, I think the first jersey I ever had was a Tiki Barber jersey, and big fan of Michael Strahan and those guys. Now I would say, because I work in the league, it's kind of more about like, hey, who was really nice in their interactions? You hope they do well. You know what I mean? It's a little bit more individual based or coach based, revolving around how our experience were in person than maybe as much as a hardcore Giants fan as I used to be.
Because in the UFC, clearly you've been there for so long now, these fighters on so many different levels. To interact with these NFL guys, is it difficult to really try to like hit them with a hard question or something, or no?
No, I think sometimes the NFL players are a little bit more conditioned to the type of media that they are expected to do. They have these obligations, and there are punishments if they don't do them. So I think that at times it can be a little bit easier, because with fighting, it's more personal. So I always want to shape it, for me, at least when I ask questions, to make sure I'm being as respectful as possible in the process. And with NFL, sometimes you literally don't have that opportunity. You don't get to be able to take the time to make it a conversation and stuff. Sometimes you just have to get like 3 or 4 questions in those 2 minutes you can, and try and get all the facts you can. But they're kind of used to it. So I would say, a lot of them played college ball where they had tons of interviews, and then they go into the NFL where every single week they're doing multiple different media sects. So it's pretty easy, I think, to get them to answer stuff. Now it's tricky on game day when you're on the field and you're trying to, like, between things they're doing, to make sure you get the most up-to-date information. But I would say that's true for any athlete. Like, who wants to be bothered on game day, right?
Right. Oh, no. And that's the criticism of ESPN. They put you in a bad spot, and you handled it well. But listen, and I've heard the mixed reactions from the trainers and stuff like that they're not thrown off by you asking questions in the middle of a fight. But I know me as a fight fan, I was sitting there going like, how are they okay with that? It's not on you, not your fault at all, but they put you in a spot where it's tough because the fans are a little nervous. I'm worried about the fighter.
Yeah. So funny enough, the two coaches that I did that with between rounds are very, very good friends of mine. So we cleared it beforehand and made sure that they were comfortable with it, kind of told them the gist of what we're going to be looking for in between rounds. And we had to try, right? Like we wouldn't know until we tried. And we see other sports, and we even see other MMA organizations do that a little bit. Like boxing does it a lot. I think LFA does it a little bit. They'll either talk to the coaches, or they'll hear sort of I don't know, like they'll say, oh, the coach just said this and that, and they'll kind of give like this is the explanation of what I heard in the corner. So I understood the idea of it, and I was willing to try it with coaches that I knew we had mutual respect for, and that they would be okay with me asking questions, and I felt okay asking them. But fans kind of had the most adverse reaction to it. They were like, what are you doing? As if I just surprised them. Like, hey,
hi, I'm over here.
Yeah, I'm like, no, they knew. Okay. So yeah, it definitely was interesting. I didn't personally love it, but if it was going to be a part of my job week in and week out, I would learn to love it. But it definitely, I think, doesn't necessarily have a place within a UFC broadcast. I just don't think that it's wise for us. And I think that's where like the Trevor Whitman on commentary, and you also see Dean Thomas doing it lately.
Yeah.
I think that is where we kind of found the middle point of what works, and we're really trying to figure out this corner work and how can we utilize this 60 seconds to the best of our abilities. And I think that's where we have other coaches kind of analyze what they're hearing or what they would like to see. And that is like a much better content nugget than maybe what I was doing.
Well, but listen, I like that you guys gave it a shot, because listen, I'm a big baseball guy, so I sit there and I listen to, like, they'll go to Aaron Boone or Joe Girardi or whoever the manager is in between innings, and it's different because, like, in between innings, people are sitting there going to the bathroom, they go do whatever they want to do, they'll warm up their arm a little bit. It's not as intense as a situation as MMA is, and that's what people forget. That's what, like, and so that's where I'm like, I'm like, okay, this is a very important time right here. If you miss something, if the coach misses something, it could be dangerous, could be deadly.
Yeah. No, exactly. Baseball guy, how about Corey's no-hitter?
Oh, I know. I'm a Mets fan. But listen, I appreciate it. My son is a Yankee fan. He woke up and he was super pumped about it. But it's now kind of like, okay, we got 6 no-hitters. It's barely a month and a half into the season.
I know.
Are you a Yankee? You're a diehard Yankee fan, aren't you?
Oh yeah. So I'm gonna see if I can move this correctly. That's like a brick from original Yankee Stadium. I've actually got dirt from original Yankee Stadium. Oh yeah, the Yankees are my first love in life.
You're a dirt girl? Now, where? Tell me how you. Because my friend used to do this all the time. He used to go to every stadium. Used to find a way to like sneak to the side and just scoop it up. What was your approach to getting the dirt?
My dad got it for me. He's the sweetest. He was like, yep. I don't quite know how he was able to bring it home, but I think he had a little container and he brought it home with him. We've got it in a glass frame now. And yeah, he's the best. Dirt, brick, and I actually have seats from the original Yankee Stadium as well. They're still on the East Coast at my parents' house. I need to figure out a way to get them here, but no, that was my first love in life, is New York Yankees baseball.
I'm laughing at that because I think everything that I wasn't sure what to do with is still at my parents' house. I think that everybody's right. It's like I live 20 minutes from my parents, but it's still there. Oh. It's still there. Do you know where the dirt was? What part of the stadium the dirt was from? Was it the outfield? Was it the mound? You have no idea.
Infield.
Very cool. My friend used to do the same thing. It's very cool. I couldn't understand it. And then after he did, I was like, I probably should have done the same thing too. It's cool,
right?
It's very cool. The fact that you have a brick is pretty badass too.
Yeah.
So what was your favorite Yankees team, or Yankees player, I should say?
Well, my very favorite player, probably as a whole, was Paul O'Neill. So I wore number 21 and everything when I played softball. I did a charity softball game last year, and I wore number 21 for Paul O'Neill.
Oh, that's awesome.
Big Paul O'Neill girl. I loved Joe Girardi when he was the catcher. Of course, Mariano Rivera, and then Derek Jeter as we got older, and his star kind of started to really rise. That's where, we all became like massive fans, but loved Andy Pettit. Who I actually loved Chuck Knobloch and stuff. Like just some random players, but no, the 96 team, the 98 team. I mean, I would fall asleep during playoff games or the World Series. My dad would wake me up, for the last 2 innings to make sure I saw the win or whatever it was. So I don't watch as much as maybe I used to, or I should, but they're still like, I was just in Houston last weekend for the fight and I was wearing my Yankees hat everywhere, just mean mugging people like, let's fight.
Let's go. Are you a hate the Astros? Are you against the Astros? Okay. Listen.
And it's crazy because some of the players like I'm friendly with.
Real? Oh, would you like Correa or Carlos Correa? Are you friends with him?
Yes, because we're friendly. I wouldn't say we're like friends on a personal level, but they come to our events. They're big supporters of the organization. But nope.
Boo. You cheated. Get out of here. No, that's the funny thing is, so like the one thing I've done for doing this podcast is I've been making like friends with a lot of athletes that are players in professional sports. And, it's interesting to get their side of things. I've been trying to get Carlos on for a little bit now. We just haven't been able to connect. I think he's a little hesitant because he's maybe where it's New York market. I might crap all over him, but that's not my goal. I actually want to have a conversation because I'm an MMA fan. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no. And that's how I feel too. It's like two separate things, right? Like I can't hold him to this standard because when he comes to our fights, because that's not what he's there for. Like we're not on a baseball field, and that's where I would like, have my gear on and like maybe not yell some nice things, but it's not. So I totally understand that you have to kind of like be able to separate him. But for somebody like me who just loves the Yankees so much, it's hard, man.
Yeah, no, I get it. Are you by any chance a basketball fan at all?
I used to be a bigger basketball fan than I am now. I've had some really lovely interactions with some players that come to our events, but I wouldn't say I really follow basketball that much. I used to be kind of a Knicks fan. My husband is a huge Spurs fan because he was born in San Antonio.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, I would say that's the sport we watch the least in our house, including like hockey, football, baseball, MMA, everything. It's basketball is the least.
So is it MMA one? I'm assuming MMA has to be one because of the training aspect too. But then what's two? Is it football or baseball?
Probably football because when I am not working, I am watching as many games as possible. It's really tricky with our schedules. We don't often know what games we're working until like sometimes, 8 days before. Oh, wow. So you want to make sure that you're following as many games as you can, or you might know I might be going to Detroit for this game, or I might have LA for this game. So you want to keep eyes on it. So I try to be really productive on Sundays with watching games and making sure I even if I'm watching only clips here or there, or just tuning in for a few minutes, that I'm getting sort of the gist of what happens each week with each team.
Last time I had you on, we were talking about Riverdale, and that was a show that you were very much into, which I kind of fell off. It was like I had I watched like 3 seasons and I was like, okay, I'm kind of over it. It was fun for a little bit. Is there something else that you're watching now? Because again, we're talking about time. Our time is very limited. You're always traveling. You're always now. You're definitely traveling again.
Yeah.
But with the sports and everything, is there another show that you've been able to find time to watch?
Yeah, I live in the gutter. So I watch all trash reality TV when I have time. I DVR everything so that I can just like watch it as quickly as possible. But like Bravo is probably the channel that besides sports is on the most in our house, because I've now sucked my husband into watching certain shows.
Oh, Joe's into it?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, he always watched Vanderpump Rules with me, but then we watched Summer House and we were like in on Summer House, which takes place in the Hamptons. And then what else do we watch? I mean, I watch all the Real Housewives, but we like series. So we like a lot of the HBO series. So right now I'm trying to catch up on Mayor of Easttown.
Yes.
So that's the one.
Yes.
Yeah. So we're behind, but it's been so great. And really, we like series, and he's a big movie guy, but I'm really not. So I think series is where we like fall in the middle of things, because otherwise I'm just going to watch trash.
Listen, you have to find, if he hasn't watched Tenet yet, I recommend you watch it with him, because that's one of those major brain teasers. If you're into that type of stuff, listen, it's different from Mayor of Easttown, which I like. I'm on episode 5. I haven't caught up completely, but it's fantastic. But Tenet, it's on HBO. I couldn't recommend it more than that. It's Christopher Nolan. If you like Christopher Nolan,
I love him. Okay, awesome. I definitely love him.
It's 2.5 hours. So get ready.
Oh.
And it's
a movie?
Yes, and it's Denzel.
Okay.
It's Denzel Washington's son is like the lead.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, I'm in. Okay. You
Okay.
sold me. Perfect.
Good. That's what I try to do here. I try to sell people on things. So Megan Olivi right now joining us again. I appreciate the time. What is your favorite part these days about working with the UFC? Like, what is your favorite segment? Like, we do segments, we do radio stuff. I'm a radio guy, so we have some bits here and there. But you do so much now. Like, you're situated in certain areas of the arena. You're sitting there next to Joe Rogan, DC, and John Anakin giving some crazy ass reactions when. By the way, the Shane Burgos. I love Shane Burgos. He's my boy. I'm tight with him. I could not see that, but your reaction to that was like, it's priceless. It's scary, but it's priceless. So what is your favorite part of being at these fights?
Well, I would say in terms of my job, my favorite part is the storytelling I get to do for certain walkouts, because John and DC and Joe, they're tasked with the technical aspect of things. And sometimes they can bring in a little bit of storytelling, but you're trying to compile 37 years of somebody's life into a 15-minute span when there's this crazy fight unfolding in front of you. There's not really a lot of time to dive deep into their background or their personal history or whatever it may be. I think John does a wonderful job at it, but for me to be able to add that poignant storytelling right before or right during a fighter's walkout, where maybe somebody at home has no idea who this person is. They've never heard of them, or maybe they're huge fans. It's my goal to give them a reason to care. And so that for me is really important, because I could literally talk for minutes and minutes for every single fighter on our roster, and it still wouldn't fulfill how special each and every one of their stories are. And so I think being married to an athlete on the roster lends itself to me caring about them and how they're perceived as a human being, and not just inside the octagon. I think when we watch athletes fight or we see their interviews on fight week, there's weight cuts, there's stress of the fight, there's crazy schedules and lack of sleep. And that is a part of who they are that week, but it's not who they are as a whole. And so for me to try and be able to give a little bit more detail, a little bit more insight into what makes them tick or what makes them happy or what they've been through, that for me is by far my favorite part of the job. But on a personal level, just the team. And especially in 2020, what we kind of went through and how we went to Jacksonville and we didn't know what was happening. And, the world was very much still in lockdown when we did those events. And then we went to Abu Dhabi a few times and it was craziness. And we were kind of on our own island. We were always really close in this traveling circus, but now I think there's so much more, like the fibers that hold us together are so much stronger now. And it really is a family. And when we do fight weeks, it is special. We look out for each other. We're always, trying to figure out, oh, hey, this would be really great for you. Do you want to do this? It's always a positive for us. And so on a personal level, it's definitely the people that make the job great as well.
I'll say behind the scenes, I've worked with a ton of UFC PR people and whatnot, and they're always fantastic. They really are so easy to work with. They're great people. So I can only imagine it definitely feels like an awesome, close-knit family. It really is. How was Abu Dhabi for you? Your experience? Did you love it, or did you feel uncomfortable at all? Was it really good?
No, I would say the only time I felt uncomfortable was the very first flight. And it was just because of the state of the world.
Oh, yeah.
But the UFC and, the government of Abu Dhabi did such a tremendous job in terms of testing before we left, mandating masks on the plane, testing pretty much every day we were there, if not a couple of times a day when we first got there and were in lockdown in our rooms. I was just thinking about it this morning. Like it was crazy. It was like out of a movie. There were times where in our testing area, it was all this crazy lighting and it looked very sci-fi. I'm like, where are we? What are we doing? It's like 120 degrees out when we were there in July, but also with crazy humidity. So we were just kind of in this little world and this bubble, and it was so fun. I mean, it was challenging. We did everything on US time or North American time. So that's very different than the Abu Dhabi time frames. So we were doing things in the middle of the night. We were waking up at 11 p.m. or I should say like 9 p.m. going to work at 11 p.m., working until 7 a.m. or 9 a.m. and then eating breakfast and going to bed. You know, it was this crazy schedule. And that was the most difficult part, I would say, is like the schedule and the sleep and trying to figure out how to be the best version of yourself when you're working all these different crazy time zones. But the experience itself was something I'll never forget and was so tremendous. And like looking back on it, it's like, man, we had it great. Like we had Taco Tuesday, they threw us a big party upstairs by the pool. You know, we were like, there was karaoke night, there were game nights. Like we got to live as if the pandemic wasn't going on for this certain amount of weeks. And it really lightened the burden and the weight on our shoulders in terms of stress and worry as we were continuing to do these live events. It was the best experience.
I talked to some athletes and they were saying that to see what the UFC had done didn't make it, say, easier, but it was like, hey, if they could do it, then we can definitely figure something out on our own. Like the fact that baseball took till July, August to really start things up again. It's like the UFC was at the forefront of this, and I love it. I love Dana's drive. I love the fact that, you know, you've already sold out 2 pay-per-view events already. You're selling on a 3rd one. I mean, it's fantastic. Give me that feeling. Tell me how it is to experience a packed house again. Has it changed, or does it give you flashbacks from the old days when every event was packed?
Yeah, in Jacksonville, I mean, I have chills talking about it. It was incredible because it represented a lot, not just, oh, look, we sold out an event, this is a great card. It represented like a return to normalcy for so many people. And now we have been able to have that a little bit. We've had limited crowds, we have limited capacity in certain places, but when the first combo feature hit and they play that music for the very first fight of the night in Jacksonville, the building was almost completely full and they went bananas at that moment, where a lot of times, I mean, you wouldn't even have like an eighth of the building in attendance yet. And it was just so special. I mean, we were all giddy. It was like the first day of school after the longest summer vacation you've ever had. And it's just so incredible. For me, you know, for my job, it makes things actually a little bit more tricky because it's like, oh, okay, well, make sure the fans behind me are behaving, or how do we get security to get me to this location? But a big takeaway for me is the positives it gives back to the athletes. I feel like there's a jolt of adrenaline that comes from a crowd that cannot be duplicated in any other way. You can't, listen, they are the greatest self-motivated athletes in the entire world, and they do not need a crowd to get them up for a fight. However, there is something to be said about what a crowd can do in those challenging moments, in those exhausted moments. Even at the start of the fight, before things even begin, it just lends itself to something extra for our athletes. And then when there are great performances and when there are these massive fights, to have a crowd give them the immediate acknowledgement, I think is so special. Like when Rose Namajunas won the belt and everybody was going bananas in Jacksonville, like, she deserved that. That was an incredible performance. But a couple of months ago, it would have just been like her corner clapping and then, you know, a couple of guests in the arena clapping. It gives the athletes what I think they deserve in that acknowledgement and that, you know, appreciation from the fans that is immediate. They can hear, see, and feel.
No, Megan, you're nailed it, because I've said that over and over and over. Like, I'm sitting there watching fights and I said, I will watch any fight. I'm just so happy that we have sports to watch. But as soon as the fans came back, I'm like, okay, I lied. Like, we need fans back. We need it, because it really is special. And it changed. Like, I have this argument with people. I think that the outcomes of these fights have changed due to the fighters. I mean, due to the fans. Like, they have literally changed the outcomes of the fights because of the energy they bring.
I cannot tell you how many athletes have said that to us, or how many athletes have said during the pandemic, listen, I'm so excited and grateful for the opportunity to compete, but I feel like there's something lost without fans. And I would say the overwhelming majority of athletes have said something along those lines, and then have also said something exactly like you were just saying, which is, these fans gave me the power to do that, or I don't know if I would have been able to pull that off without the crowd, or when I was hearing this, I was, you know, it's just, it is really special. And I do think it is important for everyone who's competing.
You just think about the championship, the title fight this last weekend. I mean, Charles Oliveira, Michael Chandler. Chandler seemed like it won the first round. Everyone was amped up, and then next in 19 seconds into the second round, he gets knocked out. And that type of change. First of all, that's why I love MMA. That's why I was trying to push it on to people that love sports, because I'm like, this is the one sport that you literally, it's a flip of the coin every time. You just never know what you're gonna get. And that type of change in the fight was outrageous, and it probably could have amped up Oliveira too because of the crowd. But imagine if it was first round, there's no crowd, you feel like, okay, I just got beat the first round. You may change the way you look at things. So I'm just happy what you guys are doing. I'm super stoked about it, and I just can't wait to come back to New York, because I really want you guys to come back.
Fingers crossed, we'll be there soon.
Dana made it sound like it's gonna be a while, but on the other hand, I will say that the mayor and the governor have come on saying that they're trying to up the capacity. And if I'm correct, Dana's not going anywhere unless it's 100% capacity, right?
Yeah, I mean, if we can sell out buildings and give our athletes the opportunity to compete in front of a sold out house, like, why wouldn't we? You know what I mean?
Right. Who is the hardest fighter to tell a story about? Because there's some of them that have questionable backgrounds. Like, I am a Mike Perry fan in some aspect. I am a Colby Covington fan at some aspect, but just because I like how they fight. I like their style in the cage. Outside the cage, they're assholes. Let's be frank. It's tough. It's tough. And I've met both of them. And I even told Colby off the air once, I was like, I shook his hand and said, dude, in the cage, you're incredible. You're phenomenal. But I just don't like some of the things you say. It's like, it's pretty nasty. And he's like, okay, cool. And he shook my hand and he was very cool about it. It was no big deal. He's a different person. I understand shtick, but sometimes a shtick is a little too much. So who is the toughest person for you to write it, to tell a story?
Well, I'll say a side note, like, I love working with Mike and Colby. They're actually very kind to me, very respectful. I've never had like a bad interaction. I do think it's a lot of public persona. And then, with Mike, there are personal challenges that we all just want the best for him.
Right.
And hope that he finds a way to live his best, healthiest version of his life. And we'll, obviously are always here to help in whatever manner we can. Colby, I've known Colby forever. He used to like go visit Team Alpha Male in Sacramento and like play basketball with my husband way back in the day. So on a personal note, I really enjoy those guys. But the hardest person to tell a story about, what's funny? It's not really an athlete, but sometimes when someone has a lot of media attention, not a Connor, because there's always a story with a Connor.
Yeah.
But when you get those athletes that you hear about quite often, sometimes that can be the difficult one to tell a story about, because you want to make sure, for me at least, I don't want to give a report just to give a report and it's all stuff you guys have already heard. To me, there's very little appeal in that. Now, sometimes you have to. I even sometimes have to ask questions that, like, listen, I even tell the athletes, like, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you. You've answered this 100 times, but for our audience, can you answer it? But to tell stories about someone who has really like had a lot of media attention in the lead up to the fight, that can be difficult, because you want to make sure it is new information that also has something to do with their fighting life or can relate back to the fight in some way. So I would say that is more challenging, just trying to figure out, like, what is the angle that I can present that is different than what they've heard in the, millions of interviews they've done in the lead up to this.
Yeah, no, and listen, a lot of these veterans, they've been around. Now, the fact that the sport is getting so big, everyone does know everything. So that's got to be a challenge. We watched a guy like Tony Ferguson over the weekend. It was another rough fight for him. Beneil Dariush, good for him with the win. Also a Tesla. Congratulations. Yeah. But Tony, you look at a guy like him, it's like, oh, he had so many, the promise between the Conor fights and the Khabib fights and all this stuff, and we never got to see those. Is this the tail end of Tony Ferguson's career? Is there like another rebound? Like Cowboy Cerrone went through that for a little bit, but I'm not sure. I can't remember if it was the same age in his career, same situation, but they're
both 37, I think.
Right. So it's at that weird point. Where do you see a Tony Ferguson going?
Well, first off, time catches up with everybody in this sport. It is it's not like a tennis you can just like play until you're 75, leisurely. Like it doesn't work like that. It's hard for me to say what I think an athlete should do, or even what I think, their age or performance says about them. Our sport is so based on like recency bias, which can be challenging. I adore Tony and think that he is so talented. I also think when you look at the sport, there's so much to do with luck. There's so much you can do, all of the work that you can imagine. You can work as hard as possible and stay focused 100%. And still then there's only a chance at things working out for you. My husband always so eloquently puts it that way because, funny enough, Daniel Cormier was just talking to somebody in our fighter meetings. I think it was in Jacksonville. And he's like, it's not just about doing everything right. He said, and then you do everything right, and then luck comes into play. And I think with a guy like Tony, when you look at like all the missed opportunities with Khabib, whether it was somebody missing weight or Tony tripping on a wire and tearing his knee or whatever, it's like, that's bad luck, right? Like the wire. I mean, how does somebody trip on a wire at a studio promoting a fight and then the fight gets canceled like that? That's
on April 1st. April Fool's Day. I thought I was dying when that happened.
I know. So it's like, I look at a guy like Tony and I don't ever want to write someone off because of what their recent performances. I do believe that there are so many factors that turn into it. I know he had a new team around him, and he had just spoken about this week after the fight, like they didn't have a ton of time to work together. And I think, of course, that comes into play. I think sometimes some athletes are just better than others. So you might never win that fight against that specific person because they are going to always, be the better performer in the fight. But it's really hard for me. And I'm very sensitive to it. I take it like very personally and try to always be as comforting as I can when I speak about it, because who am I to observe 15 minutes of somebody's life and make a statement about it? All I want for all of our athletes is for them to be safe and healthy. And I want them to make the decision based on their love of the sport and nothing else. If Tony and Cowboy continue to fight because they love it and they're safe and they're healthy and they've had all the medicals done and they're good to go for it. I don't ever want anyone to feel a pressure to fight for anything else, because I think that's where things become dangerous in a combat sport, or in all sports really in general. But especially if you're going to step into an octagon with another human being and get into a fist fight, you need to love what you're doing, not, begrudgingly do it for some other reason. So that's all I hope for them. And I always hope that whenever they make the decision to leave the sport, that they can go out the way they want to. Unfortunately, it doesn't usually work like that. But all I want is just everyone to be safe and figure out what drives them. And if it's the love of the game and they want to continue, great, as long as they're all right.
I love Andrei Arlovski, and that guy continues to fight. I'm just like, all right, cool. I'll watch it. Just be safe, my friend.
Exactly.
But it's funny you talk about that, and a couple more questions.
Sure.
Diego Sanchez, everyone loves him. All the fans, original fans, they love him. And you see what he's going through right now. To see how he got parted ways with the UFC, it hurts. It sucks. And you see that Fabia released that video of you guys was it Abu Dhabi that was at?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, it first of all comes off awful for them. And I loved Paul Felder in that moment. Like, dude, what are you talking about, man? What is wrong with you? And you guys do care about Diego. And I think we all do, which is why we're we're worried about the situation he's at right now. Can you take me through those moments for you in that situation?
Yeah, you said it best. We all love Diego, and we truly do want the best for him. And if someone is important in our athletes' lives, it is going to be our duty to try and speak to them if we have the time and stuff. I hadn't worked his previous fight that he was upset about. Again, like I said, things in Abu Dhabi, our schedules were very crazy, but I don't think any of us were going to completely ignore his trainer or anything like that. I understand that Josh wants the best for Diego as well. That's what he tells everyone. But what my problem was, and what me and Paul were privy to in that meeting that other people weren't, we were sitting in a square, and Paul and I could see that Stefan Bonner was filming us. And so I wanted the rest of the room to just know that, because we don't film those. So an athlete certainly can, it's no problem. But when it's kind of done in a hidden manner, I felt like it was important to let the producers, the other talent in the room, just know, like, hey, kind of felt like they were looking for a gotcha moment. And he started filming, and he kind of puffed his chest out and came out and was saying what he felt he needed to say. And I think had the message been given in a different delivery, it would have been better received than the way it was delivered, and the way it kind of seemed like they were trying to hide they were filming. We all want the best for Diego. It is our intention. Like, we work for the promotion. It's not like we work for an outside organization that doesn't need to highlight our fighters. We only talk about the best for everybody. So it's certainly in our job description to promote Diego and his performances and stuff. So it was really just difficult with the way the delivery was. There were some very lovely apologies the next morning at breakfast, but then I guess things went sideways again when they posted it. We only want the best for him, and I want the best for Josh too. Like, if they figure out a way to make their things work, like, I'm so glad for them. But I think trying to make others look bad while you try to make yourself look good, no matter who or what it is, never really works out. And for me as a person, I'll take a lot of stuff like people say to me, or I won't really speak up. But if you come for anyone I love, which is every person in that room, that's where I'm going to speak up. And that's why I had things to say, because we were so over our schedule and there's so much going on. And now other athletes are waiting and they're cutting weight and they have other things to do. So now all these different schedules are getting delayed. But if you try to make my friends feel bad or feel like they've done something wrong or they're unprofessional, like, that's where I'm going to come. So it was less to do about me because I didn't work that last fight, but it was like, no, we don't do that.
You need to preach. You need to, exactly what you said. When you try to make yourself look better by making others look bad, it's not going to work out. And you should preach that message, because that's all I see on social media, on Twitter. It's just not good thing. Exactly. This weekend we have Cody Garbrandt, Rob Font. I love Cody. I love his story. I'm happy he's rebounding. That knockout, was it last year now? It was Rafael. Yeah, it was incredible. I'm excited to see him. Tell me a little bit about Cody's return. Anything in particular about, have you spoken to him recently?
I haven't talked to Cody recently. I was actually supposed to do an interview with him, and then things got shuffled around on both of our schedules. So unfortunately, we weren't able to do it. But I saw an interview he gave to Brett Okamoto and said, I'm not even the version of myself where I faced Dominic Cruz. And he looked like the world beater. He's like, I'm even better than that. And so I think that's really interesting. And I look forward to seeing, what he can do over 5 rounds. He had some health issues that he was pretty vocal about within the past year that were serious and pretty scary. UFC obviously stepped up and got him all the help he needed, treatment, whatever it was. But I think that can take a toll on somebody, and having, a long stretch of time off can be challenging as well. But I think he's got a willing dance partner in Rob Font, which is sometimes where we see the best Cody Garbrandt performances. But I think Rob is just drastically underrated. He is an incredible boxer, and his MMA skill overall just continues to evolve. He's so exciting. He is so fun to watch, and he kind of comes out with this really tricky striking that really lends itself to him being successful on the feet. So I love this matchup. And like I said, I love that it's the main event, because I think it could be interesting, should it go into those later, as we call championship rounds, how this one could play out. And I think a new contender could emerge. There's a lot on the line for this one, besides just, of course, every fight's the most important fight of everyone's life. But to be able to win in maybe devastating fashion or impressive fashion and go 25 minutes really is a confidence booster, should a title shot be next or a title contention fight be next.
Last question for you. I appreciate the time, Megan.
Of course.
Is there a specific fight that hasn't been made yet that you're looking forward to seeing, hopefully, or is there a fight right now that's been scheduled and you're like, okay, that's the fight of the year?
Funny enough, yeah, it's a good question. Man, off the top of my head, to be honest, I'm really just interested to see, probably again, recency bias, but I'm interested to see who the heck Charles Oliveira is going to fight.
I know.
Because there are so many moving parts at 155 and there's so much talent. It's one of those things where it's just so talent rich. It's almost like a negative for some of the athletes. Like, hey, you're so incredible, but you're ranked like 10 or 11. I don't know what it's going to take for you to get to a title contention fight. But between the winner of Connor and Dustin and Justin Gaethje, then you've got Beneil Dariush in the mix. I mean, there's just so much going on at 155. And to see Charles finally get the belt, he finally got a title shot after 28 fights. But to see him get the belt and win it in that way, and now to wonder who he's going to be matched up with next, for me, that's going to be the really interesting story of the summer. Like who will shine as the contender at 155 next?
I almost thought that the way Chandler looked like he was going to run through Oliveira at first. I was like, is that enough to get Khabib out of retirement? Not going to happen. Not going to happen. But I was like hoping. And then after I see what happens in the next round, I'm like, okay, it's all for grabs.
I think people were hoping that too. I think a lot of people were hoping that, but I might be in the minority of people who really think Khabib's not coming back. Like when I had that conversation with him in Abu Dhabi, and then I talked to him again in Las Vegas months and months after he retired, for me, it seems like he's very steady and holding firm in that. Like, I will be shocked and I will eat my words if he comes back, but I truly don't think it's even a thought in his mind. I think he's moved on from it, which this is what I love, right? Like be at peace with the decision, and you can't ask for a better way to go out than a perfect record and going out on top the way Khabib did.
And not for nothing, I mean, he does seem to enjoy the coaching aspect of it, right?
And he's great at it. He's great at it. He's got an MMA organization that he runs as well. I mean, I think he's really finding other places where he can be fulfilled as well without competing.
Megan Olivi, I appreciate the time. You're fantastic as always. And we'll catch up soon, okay?
Perfect. Thanks for having me.